In this episode, we're going to talk about the 4 signs that listeners are overlooking your podcast. Because right now, if you are experiencing any one or more of these 4 problems, then guaranteed listeners are choosing other podcasts to listen to over yours. And I don't want that for you. I want to show you why this happens and also what you can do about it so that you can grab the attention of the listeners who need to hear your voice and need to hear your message and help them see why your show is the one that they should listen to. Welcome to Insider Secrets to a Top 100 podcast. I'm your host, Courtney Elmer. Let's make your podcast binge-worthy. If you've been podcasting for any length of time, then tell me if this sounds familiar. You publish at least a new episode every single week to your podcast. In fact, you haven't missed, but you're still getting less than 1,000 downloads per episode, despite doing everything that the podcast experts are telling you that you need to do to grow your show. Maybe people tell you they love your podcast. You get DMs in your inbox like, oh my gosh, that episode was amazing. It was exactly what I needed to hear. And it makes you feel really good. But no one has left a review on your show in the last 30 days or more. And even though you know that the content that you share inside of every episode is super valuable, only 1 or 2 listeners have ever raised their hand reaching out asking, hey, how can I work with you? Maybe you even sit there and you check your analytics dashboard once a week, but you haven't seen a significant increase in downloads or in podcast listens in the last 3 months. And my guess is, if you're listening to my voice right now, then you are probably an online expert who's figured out how to crack the code on consistent 5K months in your business or 10K months or even more. But when it comes to growing your podcast, you're like scratching your head going, oh my gosh, how do I grow this thing beyond 50 downloads an episode or 100 downloads an episode, much less 1,000 downloads per episode? And if you're nodding your head and you're like, yes, Courtney, this is me, then the good news is you're not alone. And I'm here to normalize this for you because these are the 4 indicators that your podcast might be getting overlooked by listeners who need it. And we don't talk about this enough. In fact, most podcast hosts are embarrassed to say, oh, I'm only getting 50 downloads per episode. Because at the end of the day, you probably started your podcast because you wanted to be seen as an expert. You thought this was going to be the thing that would help you expand your reach and grow beyond your warm audience so you could start reaching cold audiences who need to hear your message. And right now, that's just not happening. But you keep showing up. You keep doing everything the experts are telling you that you need to do. But you also might not know where to go to actually get help and to learn what is it that I need to do? If I'm missing something, what am I missing in order to actually see the results and the growth that you're looking to see with your podcast? And you've probably been told, well, you know what? Keep doing what you're doing. Podcasting's a long game. You just need to stay consistent. Just give it more time. But hello, if consistency was a competition, you'd win first place. And you've already been at this for what, 3 months, 6 months, a year now? So chances are more time isn't the solution. Because the reality is you can be as consistent as you want to be, but if you're consistently doing the wrong things, you're not going to get the results you want. We all know what'll happen if you eat a donut for breakfast every day. Now, you could certainly do that, but if your goal is to build lean muscle mass, well, doing that is not actually going to help you achieve that result. On the flip side of that, though, you might know, okay, I need to drink water every day. I need to eat healthy. I need to hit the gym 3 times a week. And you're doing that, and you're still not seeing results. What does that tell us? It tells us that we still might not be doing the right things, or that maybe we're doing some of the right things, but not all of the right things. So in this episode, I'm here to break down and kind of lift the curtain and just like blow up the myth that, oh, we just got to stay consistent here to grow our podcast. Like, okay, great, but wouldn't you have grown your podcast by now if consistency was the answer? So the good news is, it's fixable. But right now, other podcasts likely have something that you don't. It's something that I call a core differentiator. And what this is a messaging strategy for communicating to your listener why they should choose your show. And you might say, okay, but Courtney, what I teach is totally different from what my competition teaches. I teach it a different way. I have a different methodology. I have a different approach. I have a different belief system around it. And that's great. But If you are checking your analytics dashboard every week and you're still not seeing a significant increase in downloads, or if people are telling you they love your podcast, but no one's left a review in the last 30 days, or if you know the content you share is valuable, but only 1 or 2 listeners has ever said, hey, can I work with you? And you're publishing new episodes every week like clockwork, but you still haven't crossed that 1K download per episode milestone, then that right there tells us that your potential listeners don't understand that what you teach is totally different. And that is where the breakdown is happening. So let's say, for example, you've got 2 real estate podcasts, and host number 1 over here, Joe Smith, talks about investing strategies for commercial real estate and building passive income through commercial real estate investments. Okay. And let's say you have a real estate podcast and your approach to generating passive income through investing in commercial real estate is totally different. You have a totally different approach, totally different methodology, and you think your methodology is better. And let's be honest, it probably is. And so to your listener, they're looking for investment strategies in commercial real estate. Now, if they come across both of those shows in their feed, they're going to choose one of them. We want them to choose yours. But if you're missing a core differentiator, then your potential listeners might not understand why what you teach is the solution or the answer to the problem that they're experiencing. Which podcast is going to win the attention of that listener? The one that does a better job of communicating that they understand the problem the listener is experiencing. Let's look at 2 weight loss podcasts. Same thing is true. Let's say it's not just general weight loss, it's weight loss with keto specifically. Okay, so now we have 2 keto podcasts. And Susie Q over here is teaching keto, and she's got 2,000 plus 5-star reviews, and she's getting thousands of downloads a week, and she's top 1% on Listen Notes. And you're like, okay, but my clients are getting better results. And I want to be able to share with people what I teach and why I teach, because my approach to keto is totally different than what Susie teaches. Doesn't matter if your approach is different if your listener doesn't know if your approach is different. So this is where most people will be like, okay, but Courtney, I talk about this in my episodes. I mean, like, surely my listeners will know, and potential listeners, like if anyone were to just listen to a podcast, they would know that my approach is different. But the reality is your listeners aren't even making it to the episode to know if your approach is different. So even if you have a specific podcast on a specific topic targeted to a specific niche, you still need a core differentiator. And even more importantly than having the differentiator is knowing how to communicate that differentiator and where to communicate that differentiator so that your listeners can understand why you're different. It's not the listeners who already love your podcast that we're trying to convince. It's the potential listeners who've never heard of you. And this is going to be essential if you want to convert more cold traffic to your podcast. So if you are talking about why you're different, you're going through your methodology and you're teaching all this amazing stuff inside your episodes, and you were to tell me that, I'd be like, great, that's awesome. That's what we want. But your listeners won't know that if you're not communicating that on the 5 steps of the listener journey before they decide to hit play. This is super important. 9 out of 10 hosts don't realize this, is that communicating what you do to your listener starts from the moment they encounter your podcast, not 5 minutes into your episode where you're actually starting to teach them something new. So having high quality audio is great. You need it. It's a right step. Giving away value inside of your episodes that actually helps people. Great. You need it. It's a right step. But it's not actually going to help you grow your podcast if you don't also know how to get listeners choosing your podcast over the competition. Kind of like eating right and hitting the gym every day. But if you're not doing the right exercises in the right sequence at the right timing and with the right progressive overload, you're not going to see the results you want. Besides, you've probably heard me say before that if high quality audio and valuable content were the only things that were needed to rank and grow your show, well, you'd be ranking and growing every week. And so would every other expert like you who is putting out valuable content and who does release an episode or more every single week. Because if you don't grab your potential listener's attention at these 5 steps on the listener journey, I call them your 5 content gatekeepers, they're never going to hit play and you'll lose them. So all that valuable content that you're pouring your heart into and creating every single episode, they're not going to hear it, which is going to affect the growth of your podcast long term. So this is why when our team works with someone, whether it's an existing podcaster or someone who's launching their podcast for the first time, who wants to give themselves the best chance of succeeding and standing out in an increasingly crowded podcast landscape, we start with something called binge-worthy messaging. This is the first of 4 key components that your podcast needs to be able to get in the top 100 and stay there. It's kind of like building a house. Think of it like this. If you are building a house, in fact, we have a new one going up just down the block from us. They were pouring the foundation this week. You're going to need framing. You're going to need a roof. You're going to need furniture to make it livable. But without the foundation, the framing, the roof, the furniture doesn't matter. And it's just like that with your podcast. So of the 4 key components that your podcast needs to get in the top 100, the first one is binge-worthy messaging. And I'm not just talking about the content inside your episodes. I'm talking about incorporating this messaging on the 5 phases of the listener journey, or the 5 content gatekeepers: your cover art, your podcast name, your podcast description, your episode titles, really important, and your episode descriptions, or show notes, as we commonly call them. So it's important that we have this dialed in because this is the foundation of your podcast. And when you know how to communicate with your listener on an unconscious level, why they should listen, and when you address that in each and every aspect of the listener journey that they are going to encounter up until they're at the moment of deciding whether or not to hit play, then you are going to see listens increase and you are going to see growth to your podcast increase over time. And I mentioned it earlier inside this episode. The key thing you want to focus on is, what problem are you here to solve for your listener? Now, a problem is not a feeling. And I see this a lot. A lot of hosts will say, okay, well, I'm here to help overwhelmed business owners get clarity and put better systems in place in their business. Because when they have better systems, well, they're going to have this freedom that they got into business for in the first place. And they're going to feel lighter, and they're going to have more energy, and they're going to have more joy, and work's going to feel fun, right? And it's like, right now, your potential listener, they might be experiencing a feeling of overwhelm, but feelings are subjective. I want to know, what are they actually experiencing in reality? When they sit down at their desk, what is happening? If we were to put a video camera on them and look at them and say, what is happening in their day-to-day life that causes the overwhelm? And if you were to describe that overwhelm without using that word, how would you describe it? And then shifting your focus as an expert from the solution that you provide to simply relating to your listener that, hey, you've got this problem and I get it. Because that right there is going to be more powerful than any solution you could ever give them. Why? Because when your listener can see through all of these content gatekeepers that you're here to help them solve a very real problem that they have, they're going to be more inclined to click play on your episodes, to actually seek to get that help. They'll trust you. Why? Not because you have the solution, but because you understand their problem so well. Think of it like this. It's kind of like if you were to, let's say you were chopping veggies in your kitchen and you slice the tip off of your finger, right? Ouch. And you go to the emergency room and you've got the tip of your finger like in a little bag with ice or whatever they tell you to do. I don't remember if they tell you to put ice or not put ice, right? And you're carrying the knife and you're like, oh my gosh, I just chopped the tip of my finger off. Can you please help me? Oh, this is so, and you're in so much pain and you're like, doctor, please. And you're just like, you can't even think, the pain is so bad. I hope this has never happened to you. But if it has, I'm truly sorry, because I can't even imagine what that would be like having, your tip of your finger chopped off. Okay, so bear with me. I know this is a graphic example, but I'm going to make this point in a minute. You're going to be like, yeah, okay, I get it, Courtney. So let's say you walk into that ER, right? And you're holding your baggie with your finger and you're like, doc, help. Can you please put my finger back together? Is it salvageable? Is it savable? Right? And you're in pain. You are experiencing a massive problem right now. And the doctor looks at you and he goes, Oh man, you chopped the tip of your finger off. Dude, that's gotta hurt. Yeah. Once we get this sewn back together, you're going to feel so good. Like imagine you're going to be able to type again. Like that's going to feel great. You'll probably be able to throw a ball with your kid. Like you'll be able to grab your cup of coffee in the morning and sip that without pain. And you're like, I don't effing care. Like fix my finger. What do we need to do to fix my finger? And so this is an extreme example, but this is what I see hosts and experts doing inside of their content. They're focusing on the solution. They're focusing on how their listener or their person is going to feel when they have the solution in place. And then they try to sell the solution to their potential listener, their potential client. And this is why it doesn't work, because right now your client can't even think about the solution. The tip of their finger is cut off and all they care about is getting out of pain. And so this is where, as hosts and as experts, we have to check our ego at the door. And we have to commit to speaking from your listener's level of awareness and meeting your listener where they are, instead of speaking from your level of awareness, which is maybe years, plural, ahead of where your ideal listener is in their journey right now. Imagine how different it would be if you had gone and that doctor sat you down and was like, oh my goodness, this is serious. Like you are in pain. Okay. And the doctor just took command and he instructed everyone in the room to say, here's what we need to do. He sews your finger back together. He gives you something for the pain. He tells you what you need to do to take care of it and prevent infection. And you were like, thank you for fixing my problem. And because that doctor took command and they understood the problem so well and they knew exactly what to do, chances are you trust them because they just helped you solve that problem. So let's look at my podcast as an example. I know so much more now after 4 years and over 500 hours of study, both on my podcasts and over 60 different podcasts that we have worked with and counting, than I did when I started my podcast 4 years ago. But at the beginning, all I cared about was, how do I get more downloads? Why isn't my show growing as fast as I thought it would? Why has no one reached out asking to book a call or show interest in my program? And those were the problems that I had. And those were the problems that I wanted help to fix. And your listener has problems too. But before you can begin to communicate to your listener why you're different and how you help solve those problems, you have to know, number one, what the problems are in the first place, specifically. And number two, you have to show your listener that you know what those problems are and that you understand them. So right now, being 4 years into this podcasting journey with over 500 hours of experience, not to mention the 10 plus years of studying marketing and psychology prior to shifting all of that focus into the podcasting space, right now, you're probably listening to this show because you want downloads. You want growth. You need conversions. And if I want to be your guide and to be a good guide for you, then I know that the first thing I need to show you is not, okay, we need to dial in the messaging, we need to dial in the positioning, we need to dial in the psychology and the human behavior and all these things that we talk about here on the show that I love to talk about. But my first step is to show you that I understand what you're experiencing right now and explain why it's really happening. Because only then will you trust me enough to be like, you know what? Courtney gets it. And you'll believe me when I show you what you need to do to fix it. And the same is true for your show. And I can't emphasize this enough because it is a very big mistake that I see hosts make all the time. They get this backwards. They start talking about the root problems and the beliefs and the causes of the problem that their person is experiencing before they show their listener, hey, you know what? I get it. If you have this problem, it sucks. And I'd love to help. Your listener doesn't care what the root problem is or the beliefs or the causes or how they're going to feel once the problem is solved. They just care that you understand the problem that they're experiencing right now. And had I gone into this episode and started talking about binge-worthy messaging and you need the psychology and this and that of your listener without addressing the problem you're experiencing first, I might have lost your interest because you'd have been like, well, you know what, Courtney, no, I don't have that problem. I think I do a pretty good job of messaging. I think I do a pretty good job of communicating to my listener. You know, my episodes are great. I pour my best stuff in there. And so this is why we started with the 4 signs that listeners are overlooking your podcast. Because simply by showing you, hey, guess what? I get it, because not only have I been there, not only have I worked with dozens and dozens of people who have been there, but that this is really common in the podcasting space and not a lot of people are talking about it. So let's start there. Let's talk about why these problems are happening. Only then would you have even been open-minded enough to be like, okay, Courtney, so what do I need to do to fix it? Because yeah, you seem to understand that I've got these problems and they're really frustrating and kind of annoying because I am staying consistent. I am putting my best stuff into every episode. So we started this episode with those 4 signs intentionally. And we talked about why the things you've been doing to try and fix the problem haven't worked. And we talked about how there are 4 things that every top 100 podcast needs to be able to get in the top 100 and stay there. And we've talked in depth about the first one of those today, binge-worthy messaging, which starts with your core differentiator, not just having one, but knowing specifically what problems you solve and being able to communicate that to your listeners through your podcast messaging, specifically and most importantly, on the 5 steps of the listener journey, or those 5 content gatekeepers before they hit play. And we've also talked about how you can begin to get clearer on your differentiator by noticing when you're talking from your level of awareness and expertise, and instead checking your ego at the door and looking at what problems does my listener have that maybe you had years ago when you were at that point on your journey that they need help with right now, and showing them how you can help. This part right here, everything I'm walking you through in this episode, this is something we spend 4 to 6+ weeks working on with our clients to really help them nail what specific problems they solve. And then we show them how to plug that into their content gatekeepers and their episodes to show their listener how they're different. And when you do this, you're going to be able to grab your listener's attention in an instant, especially those new listeners who are cold to you. And this is how we grow a podcast, because now listeners can begin to understand why they should choose your show over others. And we can begin to attract more listeners to your show. And then we could do things like sharing your show on social media and driving traffic back to it. We can begin to do things like running ads and podcast swaps and other growth strategies, because guess what? The foundation is in place. And rather than doing all those growth activities and then still people aren't converting to listeners, now we know that we're going to be more likely to capture the attention of that cold traffic and of those listeners. And you'll begin to see that growth over time. Because once that foundation is built, then we can frame it. Then we can add the roof. Then we can add the walls and all the beautiful things inside and the furniture. And you're on your way. And if you want to find out whether you've got the right foundation in place for your show so that it can actually grow, check out the show notes and get on the wait list to be the first to know as soon as our brand new podcast health score assessment goes live. Now, this is a tool that we have been working so hard on for you for the better part of 6 months, and it is unlike anything that the industry has ever seen. What this tool is going to do is it's actually going to help you pinpoint exactly where your show might be losing listeners right now and hand you a custom plan with exact steps to take to plug those gaps so that your show can grow. It's called the Podcast Health Score. You'll find the link in the show notes. Go click it, get on the wait list, and we will let you know as soon as it goes live. And then speaking of listeners and attracting listeners to your show, do you know what actually makes the difference between a podcast that's interesting to listen to versus one that actually moves listeners to act? If not, come with me to the next episode where we are going to break down 3 psychology-backed communication techniques to help listeners see you as the expert that they should trust and follow, and make your message impossible for the right listeners to ignore. That's all coming up next to help you make your podcast binge-worthy.